Acknowledgement. The land on which we meet has been here from time immemorial. People have inhabited Southern Ontario for about 10,000 years, and we acknowledge the neutral people, also called the Anishinaabe, the Anishinaabe and the Haudenosaunee people, who have lived here when settlers arrived and who share this land with us. May we together learn to care for and respect each other, our flora and fauna, and the land we inhabit together. Before we get started, are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest? Seeing any or hearing any, we move on. So with the approval of previous minutes, before we proceed, I just need to address a brief administrative matter regarding our meeting minutes. At our last meeting on September the 12th, we attempted to approve the minutes from our June 13th meeting. Unfortunately, there was an oversight, and it was my oversight, because the motion to adopt those minutes was moved by somebody who isn't a voting member of TRAC, and it was incorrectly recognized by me. So for that, I do apologize. But what that means is that that motion is now void. And the June 13th meeting minutes, they remain in draft form right now. So I was hopeful that we could fix this today, but in order to do so, we have to hold a new motion to approve the June 13th meeting minutes. So I'm looking for a voting member to approve these meeting minutes. Moved by Sebastian, seconder, Carl. All those in favor? And that is carried. And I am confirming, Carl, you are a voting member. Very good on you. All right, thank you very much for that. And again, sorry for that oversight, but we do still need to approve minutes from our last meeting, which was September the 12th. So looking for a member to move and second the adoption of September 12th meeting as well. We'll go Sebastian again. Susan, thank you very much. All those in favor? And those are carried. We have no registered delegates tonight. We have nobody in the audience for unregistered delegations. So that brings us right to updates. We have 3 items under updates today. 2 from LANXESS. So Hadley, that'll be you, number 5.1 and 5.3. And Jason will have you sandwiched in the middle of that. So for the first one, 5.1, Hadley, we have you updating us on the on-site containment well. So the replacement of PW5 with PW6. And before I turn the floor over to you, I will say that the committee has received correspondence related to this item. We received it late yesterday from LANXESS, and Stacy will circulate this before our next meeting. But because it was pretty technical, and because the format it came in was email, we had asked LANXESS to recraft that in a letter form so that a lot of this information can be cited easily in the future. We can cite the letter, we can cite the date of that letter. It's just more formal and official that way. So again, the hope is that we're going to circulate both the original email that came yesterday, as well as that formalized letter, if LANXESS is in support of that, prior to our next meeting, so that we can have a much more fulsome discussion on this. Now, with that being said, we still are eager to hear of any updates that you have, Hadley, but I just wanted to preface that discussion with that caveat. So with that being said, I'll turn it over to you.
Sure. No, I do appreciate that. So the question was on the well replacement, right?
Correct.
Okay. So, but the letter is more formal and covers additional items?
Yeah, it's more 5.3.1.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's 5.3.1 that we're talking about. So you're right. All of that does apply, just not to section 5.1. So okay. Why don't we shelf that until we come back to you at 5.3.
Okay. Well, I can update on 5.1 though, because I don't think Lou is on. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Sorry. Thank you. I do feel a little like in slow motion. I get migraines from time to time, and I'm so sorry that it was today. So 5.1, the well has, I think you all know, it's been drilled and we've been working on the electric, and there's been some scheduling difficulties with the different various subcontractors that are working on it. But it's in place, and we're hoping to do, because it's a chemical plant, we have certain internal procedures we have to follow, and one is called a pre-system startup, a PSSR, and we're planning to do that. I think it's scheduled for next week. So this is very close to being online. You know, the expectation was it would be on at the end of the year, and and it's taking that long. So hopefully we get the PSSR completed next week and can get that on and running.
Perfect. And that's the big holdup then is that last piece there. Because I know that the contractor was supposed to be on site early October, so it sounds like that has happened and the work's moving forward then.
Correct, yes.
Are there any questions from committee related to that discussion?
Yeah, quick question, Hadley. The pump rate for PW6, is that going to be the same level as PW5?
I think it will be similar. Yes, and with the new well, it should be able to meet that. I don't know exactly what the number will, but it will have a similar goal because it's also it's performing the same process and system.
Thank you.
Any other questions? What was the outcome of the work, Hadley, when the contractor was in? What were they after for that visit particularly?
I think that the most recent work was the electric if I remember correctly. So it's just like if say you have a private well at your home, you need to have electric, but it's a longer run and more utilities, and also because of the nature of being a chemical plant, we have to have certain it has to meet a higher bar than it would be at your home, right? We have to make sure that things aren't like explosive and so forth. So that was part of it. It's like you not only have to be able to plumb the water into the system, but then also make sure that the electricity is hooked up appropriately.
Okay. Thanks for that. Final call for questions, comments. All right, seeing none, Jason, I'm going to turn it over to you for your update 5.2.
Okay. So I'll start with one update as it relates to the long-term collection and treatment system ECA for the sewage works, the biomonitoring condition under the ECA. So as you know, back in November, the ministry received LANXESS proposal to eliminate the biomonitoring clam study under condition 17.2. And then so the ministry reviewed that and submitted a response in April, indicating that we're opposed to eliminating it, and that LANXESS is going to have to develop and implement a new biomonitoring program as per the ECA. So in response to that, LANXESS has recently here in November issued a new work plan proposal for ministry consideration. And I believe that's been recently shared with TRAC. So at this time, the ministry is establishing a review team, and we'll work with the permissions branch as well under the ECA on next steps and scheduling. So that's the status update I have on that. The other item that I was asked to provide is a general overview of the ministry's comments on LANXESS's 2023 annual monitoring report. So I'll provide a brief overview of the regulatory driver for it, key components of it, and then get into a general overview of our main comments. So from a compliance perspective, the AMR is required as part of the monitoring and reporting conditions under that CTS Sewage Works ECA or amended ECA. As well as the existing control orders for the remediation. The purpose of the report was to provide a performance record to ensure that ministry is aware of any remedial operation problems and solutions as they arise, so that the ministry can work with LANXESS in resolving the problems in a timely manner. So the bulk of those requirements are described in more detail under the ECA. Key reporting requirements, so summarizing the annual groundwater monitoring and surface water monitoring programs, that data, tabulating it, updating concentration plume maps, doing some evaluations for trends long term. And then other reporting requirements that's linked to this is also the monthly progress reports, because some of the reporting that's required under one of the orders is actually on a monthly basis. So you're seeing some operational data presented to us on a monthly basis, which is also shared with TRAC with respect to the sewage works operations and monitoring programs associated with it. And in addition to that, we also look at the annual RCR plume stability analysis, which has been added on to the process in the past few years, which again looks at groundwater monitoring data trends over a longer term, and it provides that visual aid of seeing some changes over time. And then finally, this is all also linked with the annual environmental audit report that's required under one of the orders. But primarily for that report, it is quite distinct because it's more geared towards the operational perspective of environmental compliance and not really related to reporting on the remedial aspects, which is pushed into this annual monitoring report. So. As for the 2023 AMR review, that was the details of that are provided in our letter that was issued to LANXESS and shared with TRAC dated November 8th. Some of the key comments are as follows as it relates to pulse pumping of the offsite pumping well E7. We've just asked for additional details and evaluation of data to refine the discussion that they have around pulse pumping, and specifically as it relates to the back diffusion aspect of it. And linked to that, other pulse pumping studies, and we're aware of, at least through the technical experts meeting that was recently, that the ministry recently participated in with other members on this committee. We're suggesting that they have consideration for additional short-term pulse pumping studies at other pumping wells and be evaluated as part of next steps by LANXESS, which I understand that is actually ongoing right now. So I believe a proposed work plan is being considered and developed by LANXESS, but Hadley can comment on that. On-site residual NAPL source. So we mentioned about potential for residual NAPL at the location of the M2 landfill on site. Additional details and discussion is warranted to be included in the future reporting about the current status of the on-site NAPL that is being contained on site. So I think there was a series of a few questions related to that, and it's more for just refining that background and giving a fulsome description of the status of that piece. Monitoring well containment contaminant concentration changes. We're just requesting further discussion and interpretation for monitoring wells where we see NDMA and/or chlorobenzene concentration increases and decreases between years, just to provide some further evaluation from that perspective. As it relates to AMR recommendations on the groundwater monitoring programs, the ministry agrees with LANXESS and that no proposed monitoring changes for 2024. No significant data gaps were noted in the AMR that would result in modifications to the current monitoring programs. As it relates to next steps for aquifer remediation or remedial evaluation, based on discussions at the recent tech experts meeting, the ministry understands that LANXESS wants to proceed with next steps to evaluate the potential to enhance mass removal of NDMA and chlorobenzene through evaluating enhanced treatment to remediation technologies. It's recommended that future annual monitoring reports include information to reflect the ongoing and existing status of attenuation of NDMA and chlorobenzene in groundwater at the site, if any, based on water quality and other applicable evaluations. So that's in a nutshell what was co covered through the ministry's review of the AMR report.
Thanks, Jason. The committee appreciates the response to the 2023 AMR as well as that update that you provided tonight. And I'll open it up to questions that the committee may have in a moment. But the question that I had is these responses to the 2023 AMR, when we're anticipating the 2024 AMR just next month, how do these updates gets translated over to that? Is there an updating process for the 2023, or is it the expectation that these comments will be reflected in the 2024?
It's the expectation that these are evaluated by LANXESS. If they need clarification, that they be reaching out to us. We have monthly progress update meetings with LANXESS and their team. So if there's any issues or clarifications needed, then we'd work with them to ensure that it's appropriately addressed. And yeah, the actual 2024 report is usually issued at the end of March. So we've got 4.5 months before that's issued. So we try to give sufficient amount of time so that they can actually implement them in the next AMR report.
Thanks for that. Are there any questions?
This is Hadley. I guess I have a statement too, but if the ministry, for instance, didn't find the AMR acceptable, you could have written us a comment response letter or even a violation, right? If you said that we weren't in compliance. So that's the other mechanism as well, right? That you're saying that this report looks good. There are certain things we'd like you to put in for the next report, but there's different tools that the ministry has as well.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, if we came back and saw a significant gap in the information that's provided in the AMR, for example, missing some key components that are actually specified in the ECA, then that is a compliance issue.
I appreciate that clarification, and it was just a process orientation for myself as the next step.
Okay.
Thanks for that. Sebastian?
Yeah, a couple of quick points here, more than questions. In your attachment of the letter that you sent on the response to the AMR, the second point you mentioned here, location via Shift Factory Creek. That should actually be Shirt Factory Creek. I just wondered, and it's a very pedantic point on my part, but it is Shirt Factory Creek, not Shift Factory Creek, okay? If you see that, it's in the second point of the first page of your attachment letter. The second point that I did want to make was on point number 3. It's, first of all, I commend you and your colleagues for the depth of your questions here and the comments that you've made about the AMR. Question 3, though, deals with NAPLs. And Alan Deal presented a presentation maybe the last session about that, and I'm still a little bit confused as to his core point, which was that DNAPLs in particular were not off-site. There was no indication that they were off-site, and he provided some information about that, but I was still a bit confused as to the validity the validity of that assessment. And I wonder if somebody could enlighten me a little bit more about DNAPL and the fact their wandering nature or lack thereof, that they could in fact be off-site. I just don't know that. But if we can get a little bit more thorough response from LANXESS in that annual general monitoring report for 2024. So more of a point rather than a question, I think.
Just comment here. So the letter format that we received in an email format, that speaks a little bit to the question. Doesn't obviously link it with the annual monitoring report, so that may be a very good point to add to this, but I just wanted to make sure you knew a response for the DNAPL question is coming.
Okay. Can you give us a little bit more as to when that might be?
Oh, it's actually a question maybe for Hadley, like, we could circulate the email right now, we have asked to have it in a letter format so that we have a date and a signature and issuer of the answers.
Yep,
So
it's item 5.3.1, and it's what Nathan alluded to earlier. It's a pretty technical response, and why don't we try to make it into slides to further discuss the discussion for the December meeting too?
Any clarification would be appreciated. I mean, the core point that I have, Hadley, is that I'm still not quite convinced that there is evidence to suggest that Dean apples have not gone off-site. And if somebody could clarify as to why they have not and provide the evidence, I would be appreciative. I just didn't quite understand everything that Alan was trying to convey. It was just a little bit more technical than I'm familiar with.
I may just pause that question because it's relevant, but it is on the next item for the agenda, and I didn't want to preclude anybody else from asking questions specifically to Jason, knowing that he's having to go soon. So are there any other questions from Jason around his update? Yes, Susan. You're muted, Susan. See the moment. when
Okay,
it
can you
clicks.
hear me now?
yeah,
Okay, I just wanted to check with Jason. At the last meeting when we asked about the tests that the sampling that the ministry had done on farm properties along the creek, and he explained that information would not be released until they had talked to the farmers, which made sense to me. So I just wanted to know the status of that.
Yeah. So we've been coordinating with public health on this, so that's through that process, and we're in the final stages of finalizing our summary letters for the property owners. So tentatively, I would like to have that completed by end of November.
Great.
So if I can stay on that track, TRAC can expect to see the full technical report early December.
Thank you.
Yep.
so that can be December.
Yeah, that'll be a nice update for our December meeting, for sure. All right, so I will turn it back over to you then, Hadley. We started that conversation. I attempted to start the conversation much earlier, but if we continue with that update for item 5.3.1.
Sure, but I also want to just mention that we continue to have discussions with the ministry on the risk assessment too. We have another one scheduled for the 18th. So that is ongoing to work on resolving the comments and also trying to find the middle ground on working to get that approved, or if we need to do more sampling. So that's an ongoing item as well.
Thank you.
Okay, so back to the technical response from GHD. So this is, even when I was trying to read through this and summarize their comments for the meeting, I don't know if I can do it justice. And that's where I think I will put it together as a few slides that we can talk through in December. And part of it, I guess I was thinking that this was more for Tiffany and Nathan and almost like loose ends from prior to when I came to LANXESS. So I apologize for that and maybe not quite looking at it holistically and realizing that it's questions for the entire TRAC committee that we need to clarify the loose ends on. So some of it was work on the east side and former gravel pit investigations. And I kind of thought they were like hanging chads, right? Maybe that's just an American expression from the 2000 election, but they were leftovers. So I'll work to make these a little more formal and present in December. And my apologies for getting them not in a letter, but I didn't realize that it was for the entire committee. I guess I thought this was more just correspondence for Tiffany. So I do apologize about that. And also I've made a note on Sebastian's question on the Dean apple and trying to really take that, into consideration and make sure we carry on as a talking point, that why we don't see evidence of it offsite. We do see in its concentrations is the simplest answer, right? We definitely have high concentrations still on site, and we're not seeing that equal. But that's not I'll try to get Alan to explain it a little bit better, right? Because it's not my specialty. So the other item then is the 2018 technology evaluation update. And that was also kind of unfinished business. That's a better term, right? Unfinished business from prior to me joining. And that was something that had only been submitted in draft. So we have now reviewed it. And I do believe, Tiffany, did you get it final?
Of which,
The 2018 technical evaluation 5.3.2?
don't think so, but hang on.
Okay, let me confirm on that as well. I thought that we had submitted that, but it would have just been late last week or early this week. I do know I had just a few minor comments. Kind of some of it was just to give it a little more context. So that was something that, I'm sorry?
Yeah, no, I got hit in the head on Friday, so I could very well have missed an email, so I'm just gonna double check. Like, there were a few things that rolled in last week, so
Okay, I'll confirm too. So it was something that was drafted in 2018, but only as draft. And it's very similar to what our tech experts meeting in September was, right? It's looking at different evaluations for the groundwater in order to see if there's a way to speed up the NDMA cleanup in situ, or different technologies that we're not looking at. And part of when they did that in 2018, I forget if it was exactly before or after, they also did the in situ chemical oxidation pilot test, and that used regenesis compounds to place into the ground, because that's one of the ideas, that NDMA can be cleaned up with oxidation, and so chemical oxidation. But the takeaway was from Alan's presentation last meeting, it would have to be every 13 meters. We'd have to put a well, essentially. That was the radius of influence it had on the NDMA. So we're realizing that maybe there are certain tools that we could use where we still have our highest concentrations if we can get into that area, right? If the landowner allows it and there aren't buildings that are impeding us from it. So the 2018 evaluation looked at these things, and it's just a summary of technologies, and we finalized that document, but we're also moving forward now with the 2025 work, and that's what Jason spoke of. So GHD has submitted a proposal to me for the 2025 work, and I've approved it and submitted funding, right, a funding request from LANXESS to allow it. And that's where we'll be working hand in hand with the ministry, because the goal is to temporarily stop running the internal pumping wells, to let the groundwater come back up and see what the true concentrations in groundwater are of NDMA and chlorobenzene, and not have it affected by the pumping. And we're taking samples, and we're also going to be monitoring it over time. So we want to look at the groundwater. There's different properties, right? How much oxygen is there? What is the pH when it's not under pumping conditions, and so forth. And also we'll be taking some samples for GHD to send to their laboratory. They have a laboratory in Niagara Falls that they take, big aliquots of water, groundwater, and they use different additives to see if we can break down the compounds in situ. So they'll be maybe adding oxygen or adding the regenesis type compounds to it, chemical oxidation. And also there's different more natural type additives they could look at. So they'll try to see what will work to help break down the NDMA in the groundwater itself, without just having what how we do with the UV, ex situ. It's called a bench test study. So they're not doing it in the ground, but they're taking the groundwater and doing it on a bench in a laboratory to understand how that NDMA can be broken down differently. So we are planning to start that work, but we need some approvals from the ministry, of course, because our ECA says we'll be pumping all these wells, and we're suggesting a timeout, I guess is a good way to say it, to do the testing on it and evaluation. Are there any questions there? Did that make sense?
Yeah, I'm seeing a number of questions, so I'm gonna start with Sebastian.
I don't want to monopolize, who else is?
I saw Linda with the questions.
Linda.
Oh, it's okay. So I think there was a little bit of that in the minutes from the last meeting as well, too, Hadley, and while I understand, I think I understand. I think it is important that we try and come to some kind of resolution as to what's left and where, because even as Sebastian has said about the Napples, where are they? But I guess my concern is if we stop the pumping on site, correct? What does that kind of effect have to the groundwater off site? And because we've been doing so much and we've got the risk assessment for the creek, what's it do for water entering the creek?
Okay, it's a good question. Let me carve it out in a couple steps. We would never stop pumping on site. So we're not planning on stop pumping on site at all. That's off the table. That's important because that's where the DNAPL is and we don't want it to migrate, right? That's where there's still the highest concentration. So it's PW4 is the main on-site well. And I have told GHD we have to do everything to keep this pumping because it's so important. And even to the fact that maybe we look at some redundancy and think about putting another well there so that it's not down for a year, like the PW5, PW6 replacement. So I want to make sure I assuage your concerns on that. That's not something I said. We will always pump from on-site. It's the interior off-site wells that we would stop. So we won't be losing containment because it's those exterior, the most southern, the ones at the edge of the plume. We will never stop those during this pilot, right? This pilot is to understand the middle because there's still areas if you think about the Ricker evaluation, I don't have it ready to bring up and show you, but the main NDMA concentrations are kind of central and even maybe a little to the east. So it's of the offsite plume. So it's those interior wells that will stop pumping and let that groundwater rise back up to its more natural type elevation to sample and to start looking at and studying. So we won't lose containment. The plume won't be moving because it will still have those southern wells that will be extracting it for treatment. And this is only a few month study. It's not a forever study, right? We plan to do it and monitor weekly. We'd be monitoring those interior wells weekly to see where the elevation is and what the concentrations are. Thanks, Jason.
Yeah, thanks for that clarification, Hadley.
Oh,
sorry.
And the same with the creek. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sorry. Go ahead, sorry.
The creek will also be protected because it's the on-site wells protecting the creek, right? They're the ones that are making sure it doesn't move with that the on-site water doesn't move into the creek, right? They're like a sentinel army kind of pumping and keeping it away from the creek. So hopefully that answered your questions.
It did, thank you.
Essentially, Linda asked the question. Yeah, so leave it at that. Thank you.
I have just one more that answered two of my other questions, but, so just how long are you planning for these shutdowns of the pumping wells to be in order to get those samples?
I forget what GHD sent me was a proposal, and now they have to write a work plan to get approval from the ministry. And I can't remember exactly what their proposal said, but I think it was just maybe a month to 6 weeks.
Is this something that you would anticipate would happen in 2025 potentially if ministry were to approve?
I sure hope so. Yes.
Any other questions? I think you're good on that one, Hadley, if you want to go to 5.3.3.
Sure. And I think Jason touched upon it too. So we have submitted a updated biological monitoring fish tissue study. It sounds like that's what the ministry wants, right? I think it was Ryan that you brought up that we could maybe get clams and get the permits from the clams, but it seems like it's a little more difficult and maybe not necessarily data that the ministry wanted.
just to step in, I quickly scanned through like the document that went out today, like on the small-bodied fish biomonitoring study. So, I mean, that makes sense to me. Those fish are in situ, like, so it sounds like a good alternative. Yeah.
Good, thank you. Yep, that's exactly what it is. So we're basically putting out, we're electrofishing at I think it's every 2 years was the proposal, collecting. So we do that anyway to look at fish species and how the river is recovering, the creek is recovering. But this would be every 2 years they would take samples from the same locations basically that we did in the clam study and submit those to the laboratory to see what compounds are in situ in the fish. So I think in a way it's a little bit of a better idea, right, than putting in clams and letting them be, moving them and having them be
Yeah.
into the water, right?
Logistically, it makes more sense. I just think, and I'm sure this will come out in the more detailed plan, but I'd just be curious on like which tissues, how many fish, like composting samples, like I'm sure those details will be provided. But those are things that I would, like to review or to be interested in knowing when they come out, like in terms of the study design.
I think it's just based on weight, right? So it's you can't say exactly what you want until you go in there and see what you get, and then it's a composite of whatever fish you're getting, and for the most part, it's fillet, I think, is what they're submitting to the laboratory. But I'll make sure I get you those
Yeah, because
details.
I mean with small-bodied fish, it's harder to get the
Yeah.
fillet. But anyway, I'm sure those details will be in GHD's plan, or it would be good to see those when they're ready.
Okay. I'll work to see if I have any more information on that.
Yeah, yeah. But yep, sounds good. Thank you.
Anything else on that, Hadley?
No, I don't think so. Oh, we did also indicate that if the concentrations are the same as what's seen up gradient after, I think it's like 2 or 3 consecutive events, then we would stop doing that, right? So if we're not seeing anything from the data, we asked for relief then, right? That's to show that there's no harm to the fish. And that's something then for the agency to approve, if they agree with or not.
All right, thanks for that. We have a question from Sandy.
Thank you. On the fish monitoring compared to the clams and mussels or mussels, what we were doing before, is this like a brand new study from here going forward, or is there any way to compare to what we've collected in the past?
It would be new moving forward. So we're doing the species of fish, but this would instead be looking at if there's any impacts to the fish tissue itself. So I think we have the background data we have all of the old data from the clam mussel study that says what they uptook. And it's not a apples to oranges comparison, but it will be very similar in, are the fish being impacted still from what might be in the sediment or the water?
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions or comments? Ryan, thank you for taking the time to review that, knowing that it just came out today. I wasn't anticipating anybody would have eyes on it, so I do appreciate you taking that extra step. With that being said, for the benefit of the rest of the committee, this item will be on the December meeting as well. So 5.3.1, just so that you have sufficient time to review that documentation and bring forward any questions or concerns in this forum. So I will note that. Excuse me. Are there any other questions though? Seeing none, thank you very much for those updates, Hadley. Susan, you just appeared. You didn't have a question, did you?
No, I ran out of battery.
Okay, welcome back. You found your plug-in. Under other business, I just wanted to touch on a couple of things. The first being, the 2028 order deadline and remediation framework discussion. I mentioned it's going to be a standing item on our committee agenda. I thought it best fit under other business today because we don't really have much in terms of an update that would be agenda worthy. So I don't really anticipate much in terms of discussion tonight, but I still wanted to keep everyone informed of the progress that we have made. So We are currently in a process where we're awaiting LANXESS's draft proposal that's going to outline the updated remediation objectives, as well as some of the reasonable options for consideration by this committee and obviously the broader community. So I think that this committee understands that this is going to be an important and a thorough process that's going to take effort and time. But I think that receiving this proposal at our earliest opportunity, and obviously at the earliest convenience of LANXESS, is really going to help us to move forward collaboratively. And when I'm looking on my notes, and Hadley, this is kind of directed at you as in form of a question, but if we're looking at what that draft proposal as far as a timeline is going to come forward, am I correct that it was listed as Q3 in 2025 that we would see that proposal?
This was for, again, for alternatives for remediation, right? I want to make sure I understood you at the beginning.
Correct. And not just that though, but, and correct me if I'm wrong, please, Tiffany. But this is a part of those broader discussions that we move towards the new control order even. So while it may, hopefully does include new technologies, I think that it's a larger discussion that we're having that includes, you know, what is LANXESS plan moving forward post 2028, for instance, when this control order expires.
Sure. So,
yeah,
go ahead.
Hadley, I was just, I realized that we have, that you've prepared the work plan, and I did a quick look, and I have not seen that draft work plan or the evaluation of technologies document. So that's the first step. We realize that, but then we're looking for like a schedule to go with that work plan, and then ultimately the evaluation of the new technologies and so on. Like the timing of that is what we're trying to sort of align and ensure.
So I can build on that as well, because I'm just going to read from the September minutes, and this might add clarity for everyone, but it was noted that coordination with LANXESS, the ministry, the region of Waterloo is needed to draft a new control order, with LANXESS expected to propose a timeline by Q3 of 2025. And that's where this confusion came up. Are we waiting until Q3 of 2025 for a timeline when we can expect a draft proposal?
So I'm trying to open up my slides from last meeting too, and it's buffering, right? It's not working. The timeline is, the ECA is definitely a long time out there still. And that is going to be a little bit of a back and forth, a lot of back and forth with the ministry on getting that language correct and what they want to see. And the pieces that we need for that is to understand if there's a way to enhance NDMA destruction in situ or a different tact for the cleanup. And that's where we need to do the science, right? So the science is what we hope to do in 2025 with what I just discussed, with stopping the interior pumping and testing the groundwater and looking at the concentrations and thinking outside the box, right? Like thinking, are there other solutions to help clean up the NDMA quicker? And it's still decades. That's what needs, to be heard. This is a wide and diffuse plume with a very low target, parts per trillion cleanup standard. So it's not quick. So the parts that need to go into the ECA are all of the science and the stakeholder engagement with the TRAC and also with the region. They're a very important stakeholder, right? They have goals to provide clean drinking water to the different municipalities, and they know that they're growing. So we're trying to work with everyone on looking at where we can, what we can accomplish and what's reasonable for the new ECA. So I did get my slides to open to try to understand what the Q3 2025 goal was. It's a framework, yes. So the first one, we wanted to get the 2018, get that draft finalized. and then get the work on the proposal and the work plan with the ministry for the new work. And that is ongoing right now, right? We hope to have a work plan into the ministry by December. And then also an updated 2018, update the 2018 technology evaluation. We hope to also accomplish that by December. And I think I think you guys remember, I have somebody from Arcadis also looking at the conceptual site model just to see if they see anything different that, or different idea that we're not seeing, you know, the current team. And then the last bullet on my slides were continued discussions with the ministry, the region, and TRAC on development of a remedial framework, remedial work, and draft control order, third quarter of 2025. So I think that's really talking about what will a future control order look like, and we're not going to know until we get further with the science. That was a long answer. I hope
I was
people
with you
followed it.
right until the end there, but that's when I started to lose you again, because in my mind, you were saying that the Q3 2025 was really just to establish the timeline until that last comment you made there, which made it seem like indeed it was for just a draft proposal, right? Not the final proposal, but just a starting point of what LANXESS kind of sees as that path forward for us then to engage with as a committee and ultimately a community to ensure that this aligns with what their goals are too. So again, I think that personally, and this is just my opinion, not the opinion of the committee, Q3 2025 for a timeline document is waiting too long. I would like to see that pushed forward. And my concern would be is, you know, if we wait until all of that science comes forward and then the results are not very favorable, well, that just puts us back potentially a whole year for developing what the future does look like, right?
Okay, let me talk with the ministry on it more and see where we can get. I understand what you're saying, and I'll work to see how I can expedite that.
Thank you. Are there any other comments on that update, General Sebastian?
I'm wondering if it would be helpful if there was also TRAC participation in this process. And it's not just the LANXESS and the ministry, but perhaps also TRAC as well. Input from stakeholders, I think, is a positive. It might complicate things a little bit, but it could also preempt problems down the road as well. So perhaps a couple of members from TRAC might also be warranted here. That would be my suggestion.
Or perhaps through the TRAC, the intent of this committee and meetings would be that maybe they can present some preliminary discussion highlights so that they can float the ideas past the group.
That would be fair too. You know, the assumption that we have to have a fully baked proposal or draft here isn't necessarily the case. If we can have high level discussion points, I think that would be that would meet the needs of a lot of the members, unless I'm getting some nods. So is that helpful feedback then, Hadley?
It is, yes, thank you.
Didn't mean to put you on the spot there. Any other questions, Linda?
Not necessarily a question, but I think, and I know Jason had to leave, so it probably would have been helpful to have him here because we are dealing with the ECA, which is an approval. So while I appreciate what we want and what LANXESS wants, I think we need to know what the ministry wants and what their timelines are so that we can pull it all together, right? There's those three. So we need everything. So.
Yeah,
I agree with that statement. And I need to also just say that a lot of times these ECAs get down to, it's a legal document, right? So there's a lot of lawyers and attorneys who have input and discussion. So, right? So fair, enough said.
Yeah. Yep, been there, done that too many times.
Yeah, yep.
Thanks for that discussion. Is there any other questions broadly on the framework yet? Sorry, Eric.
Our point of view as TRAC, LANXESS is going to have a work plan with the ministry. How are we going to communicate with our stakeholders, i.e. community? Do we update them once we've got the broad strokes of control for a draft plan going forward, or does the community want an update in advance of that? Understand where we're at today, and then a year later, they're gonna hear where we think we're going. What's providing the most benefit to the community? That's something I think we should decide probably maybe or quickly.
Fabulous question. I'm gonna just shelf that one for a moment because I think it naturally leads into the second update that I wanted to give under other business, which is the presentation from TRAC to council, which I think is a pathway that we could do just that. But I would open it to the rest if there are any ideas that they would like to share related to Councillor Schmidt's question. Engagement is a big piece. I'll commend Stacy for the work that she's been doing on the Engage Waterloo Region website for TRAC. She has been doing a fabulous job of updating that with these meetings and a lot of the key documentation. So we really are trying to bring people in from the community to become knowledgeable about this. But obviously that was some of the feedback we got, was we need some work there as well. So welcoming any thoughts or feedback. You need to bring it up with no ideas?
I guess in HWR, I've got mixed feelings about that platform. Great information there, but the people go access it. I'm not sure, does the township pay for advertising weekly in our local media? Is there an opportunity after every TRAC meeting to have a one-page summary of what where we're at and next steps?
So just to give you a little update, the HWR website will be transitioned to social pinpoint in the new year. So it'll be a new format of that platform. And also we do post ads for these meetings in the newspaper to advertise that they're being held. We do have that ability.
I guess I'm wondering, advertise the meeting, can we then advertise not the minutes, but one page, 3 or 4 paragraph summary?
Yeah, no, I think that's some good feedback for us to take back. How can we, looking at AI companion on my screen here, how can we potentially summarize some of the key points, maybe even make it less painful for the administrative staff? So yeah, we'll take that back. I think that's good feedback. Some of the other things that I've heard was a town hall, and I'd be more than willing to be involved in a town hall. I don't know if anybody on the committee would also like to do that. I think that we could probably plan for something like that in the new year if we had a worthwhile topic like this to bring forward and solicit feedback. So I would be happy to lead something like that if the committee feels as if that would be a good idea. Question?
I approve. I'm just a little bit conflicted because I mean, I do believe in transparency and making as much information that we do here available to the general community. But whenever in the past, whenever we've tried to do that, the response to a town hall meeting or something equivalent has been derisory. I'm afraid, you know, and the reality is that a lot of people don't show up who you think might be interested. So the cynic in me tells me it's a good idea, but the reality, it's not going to work. But again, last week I was contradicted because we had a meeting last week about the bypass, which I think surprised everybody. So again, I'm not the last word on this, but if you were to organize a workshop, I will be on there if you want me to.
Okay. Yeah.
I wonder if it would make sense to wait until we have a timeline before we go down that road. I know we can't wait till we've got everything figured out. That's not the point of it, but I think we need to make sure we have enough information to share that's of interest.
I agree. If we're going to do something like that, we would need to be deliberate with our approach and not just kind of go out with half-baked questions. So yeah, I definitely appreciate that. Actually,
Just point of clarification for Hadley. The process that's going to be undertaken, you hope, in 2025, is that going to be at the beginning of the year or more in the latter part of the year? timing is an issue here. And I'm wondering if preliminary plans call for some technical work being done at that facility in Niagara Falls, being done earlier rather than later in 2025.
It most likely by the time, because we have to get approval from the ministry, right? And Jason said that he had some internal reviews that needed to be done to make sure, because we have a control order, he needs to make sure that it's okay to stop pumping from some of the interior wells, because that's in conflict with the control order. So it won't be immediate, because we can't just do the work without that ministry approval. So if we plan to send them the work plan in December, I'd imagine they'll probably need let's say 3 months for that review and approval, or maybe some back and forth on what's acceptable, what's not. So then if we have approval, it would be a Q2. And that's a good time for field work, because that's what this is. So it probably April, May, June type time frame, hopefully to get the water levels up, to do the sampling that we want to do, because we're looking at periodic assessment too. Is the oxygen changing as the water comes up? Is the pH changing? Are other factors changing? Are the groundwater samples that we'd submit to the laboratory changing? The concentration. So we want to look at it over time, and that means it's not like it's a one-time event. And I do think it's a few months. So let's say April, May, June, we have to then process the data. That's towards the third quarter and into like a year from now, where we have maybe information that is relevant to discuss.
So your timeline makes perfect sense. It's just a little bit disappointing, that's all.
It's the reality. It's just this work takes time.
Yeah.
I know.
Understand.
And you all have heard that, I know, for years. So it is, I'm sure it's a frustration.
Yes, indeed. Thanks for that. Any other questions, comments related to that before we move on? The only other update is that we are still targeting a presentation for Township Council in February of 2025. If timing permits, we are hopeful that we can include LANXESS's 2024 work plan that's going to be provided by GHG in our upcoming TRAC update to council. So we're hoping that that can come in and can be turned around for that presentation in February. I just wanted to highlight, based on our preliminary discussions from our last meeting, though, kind of where we've landed at a high level for that presentation. Tiffany and I will be working on this, but we haven't put a lot of effort into it at this point. So if anything that you hear doesn't resonate, please give us that feedback now so that we can tailor it appropriately. But right now we have on the list, we're going to highlight the key outcomes from the recent technical expert meeting. We're going to outline the committee's current work initiatives, detail the process that's leading up to the 2028 control order deadline, ensuring the council's informed about the critical timelines and actions, at least the timelines that we have access to at this point. We're going to reference the record's recent plume stability presentations to provide context, knowing the council has been exposed to this in the past. And we're going to update on LANXESS's proposed and ongoing project work and timelines at a high level. So that's what I have, but we also, I remember, had mentioned last meeting as well that there's a new plant manager at LANXESS, that we may try to coordinate an introduction of the new plant manager for council at that time. So with that, I just wanted to pause and make sure that that captures the discussion that we had last week. It still resonates with you, and there's nothing that you would like to add to or potentially even remove from that list. I'll be right back. It is a work in progress, so if something comes up over the next week or two or month even, just send me an email, send Tiffany an email. We're going to continue to work on that one. And we do intend to come back in front of this committee to let you know kind of where we land on that presentation. We're not going to show up at council without an approved presentation from this committee. Okay. Any questions on that? I don't have any other business. Does any members of the committee have any other business? Yes,
Is that December 12th meeting? Good, next year's schedule slot at all? Would be one before the February council update, or is that,
And then defer to.
Yeah, so we have a scheduled meeting with Hadley on Monday to lay out proposed meeting schedule and what we can expect at each meeting so that we have a bit of a understanding of which meetings fall when, to be consistent also with our terms of reference. How many meetings we make sure.
And that is an agenda item of the December meeting, is to schedule forward for 2025. With that being said, our next meeting date is December the 12th, 2024. That is a Thursday, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
So just wanted to make sure that everybody is okay with that. Linda,
I'm kind of in limbo.
kind of in limbo.
Well, yeah, it has to, yeah, I could be in Ottawa, but I won't know until after next weekend, so, but if there is any issue with it, I'll let you know as soon as I do, but.
Very well.
And it's not something I'll be able to,
Step away from.
yeah.
Okay, thanks for letting us know, Sebastian.
I'm in a similar situation. I think there is something on the agenda on December 12th.
I will be in Ottawa.
Well, looking like.
I won't.
You're not going to Ottawa?
Mine's not a guarantee, but
Seeing
just
that
giving a heads up.
a couple maybe,
I'm definitely gone.
you're definitely gone.
Definitely gone.
Are we okay moving forward with the December 12th meeting, knowing that we're going to have an opportunity to discuss some of the things that we went over today? Do we want to bump that meeting? Be hesitant to bump it much further into December. I know that January is jam-packed from the council's perspective, which may make it more difficult to sneak a meeting in then though. So I think that I may just leave it as is, with hopes that we have quorum.
That's the only thing I was just gonna ask, what your,
Would we have quorum? Might be close.
If you're away, can you zoom in or?
I'll be driving.
Okay.
I'm at a concert as far as I recall.
Concert, when you do not want to zoom in.
No, I don't think that would be appreciated.
Would a different day that week work for people? Would Wednesday or Monday potentially? I don't really want to do Friday. That would be rude. You're open?
Monday or Tuesday of that week would work for me. Wednesday is not good.
A Wednesday.
on which,
Stacy, would it be worth sending out like a doodle poll to try to coordinate what times may work for people? That's something that you could help with?
So for sure you want to reschedule, I can send out a doodle poll.
I'm thinking so, knowing that 3 for sure are not here. If possible, we would look to reschedule, and if we can't, then we can proceed with the 14th as long as we can. The 12th, as long as we can ensure quorum. I'm looking at November.
Are people away the whole week or just that day?
I'm just away that day, not Thursday.
And Linda, would you be around?
I'm saying with Hadley, Monday and Tuesday of that week, I'm fine.
That would work. That's looking like it might work, so let's try to.
Monday's the best day.
Monday.
Yeah, Monday would be better for me.
Monday work for you?
It does,
Yeah.
as far as I recall.
All right, why don't we just plan it then? For the Monday, save ourselves a doodle poll. So we'll make that update. That'll change it from the 12th to what, the 9th?
Right.
When you resend, the BIA doesn't even visit.
No.
No, I don't.
No,
There's a BIA.
which BIA, Elmira or St. James?
Elmira.
No, we're good. I'll have to be 2 places at once. All right, so if we're all good then with the 9th, that clears that up. That brings us to adjournment. Can I get a motion to adjourn? Do we need motions to adjourn? Yeah, okay, I saw Brian, you motioned, and Ryan, Brian and Ryan, so all in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much, everyone. Thanks for the discussion.
Thank you.